This story is about two very big and powerful countries. One is the United States, also called the US, the other is China. These two countries are the biggest economies in the world. They buy and sell many things from each other. This is called trade. For many years, trade between the US and China grew larger and stronger. But later, things began to change. The way they traded started to have problems. The US government decided to make new trade rules. The president of the US at that time was Donald Trump. He made a new plan called America First. This plan meant that the US would try to help its own businesses and workers more. One way to do this was by using something called tariffs. Tariffs are extra taxes. These taxes are added to products that come from other countries. When a tariff is added, the price of that product becomes higher. The US started adding these new taxes to many Chinese goods. They hoped Americans would buy more products made in America. The US also wanted China to change some of its trade rules, but China did not agree. The Chinese government thought the new taxes were not fair. So China replied. It added its own taxes to products coming from the US when both countries add taxes to each other's goods. This is called retaliation. This back and forth made the problem bigger. Many people started calling it a trade war. Trade wars can make life harder. Prices can go up, and businesses may lose money. This story will explain how this trade fight started, what it means, and how it could change the world. 2. A new trade plan. President Trump wanted a new trade system. His idea, America First, meant that the US should think about its own people and workers before helping other countries. The goal was to make American companies stronger and create more jobs. To do this, the government added new taxes on goods coming from other countries. These taxes are called tariffs. For example, if a company from another country sells something in the US, they must now pay an extra fee. This makes their product cost more. The hope was that Americans would buy more local goods. At first, the US added a 10% tax on many items from all countries. The US said the old trade deals were not fair. They believed that other countries, especially China, had rules that made it harder for US companies to sell their products. So the US wanted new trade deals. Over 75 countries began to talk with the US about changing trade rules. During these talks, the US paused the extra taxes for most of these countries, but China was different. China did not just talk, it added its own taxes too. Because China replied with its own tariffs, the US treated it differently. This was the beginning of a more serious trade fight between the two nations. 3. China fights back when the US added taxes to Chinese goods. China did not stay quiet. The leaders in China thought the taxes were unfair and harmful to Chinese businesses and workers. China had to decide what to do. It chose to fight back. China added its own new taxes to goods coming from the US. This response is called retaliation. It means answering one action with a similar action. So the trade fight got worse. The US increased taxes on Chinese goods, sometimes up to 145%. In return, China raised its tariffs on American goods to 1 to 5. This is called tit for tat, which means if one country does something, the other country does the same thing back. Both sides kept raising taxes. A speaker from the Chinese government said that the US started the fight. They said China had to defend itself and protect its economy. They also said that no one wins in a trade war. China didn't want a fight, but it was ready to protect its interests. The US saw China's actions and warned that taxes might go even higher, maybe up to 245. This showed that the argument was getting more serious. It was no longer just about trade, it became a big problem between the world's two largest economies. 4. Taxes get higher after China added its own taxes. The US took more action. The US said it might raise taxes even more, possibly to 245% on some Chinese goods. Why such a high tax? Because the US believed China was fighting back with unfair tariffs. They wanted to stop that. Other countries were still talking with the US about trade. So, the US waited before adding more taxes to them. But for China, the US did not. Wait, they said China acted too strongly and needed to be treated differently. China did not agree with the new high tax number. They said the US started the fight. China's government said they were just protecting their country and businesses. They also repeated that nobody wins in a trade war. China said it did not want to fight, but it would not back down. Now, trade between the US and China became more expensive. Prices went up. Businesses and people in both countries started to feel the pressure. 5. Goods at the center of the fight. This trade conflict wasn't just about money. It was about real products too, things people need and use. Some very important goods became part of the fight. For example, metals like steel and aluminum are used in building things. The US and China both trade these metals, but China also produces special materials needed for technology. These include gallium, germanium, and antimony. These are not normal items, they are used in electronics. China is also the main supplier of something called rare earth metals. These are used to make strong magnets, smartphones, and even military tools. China stopped selling some of these materials to the US. This caused worry around the world. Why are these materials important? Because they are used to make phones, computers, electric cars, airplanes, and military tools. Without these materials, companies cannot build modern machines. This creates big problems for countries that depend on China.So. The trade fight is not just about buying and selling. It is about who controls the important materials that power our modern world. 6. A focus on safety. The US government began to think more about national security, keeping the country safe. They became worried that the US depended too much on China for important materials like metals and minerals. These materials are used to make things like electric cars, planes, and computer chips. Even the US Army uses these materials for its equipment. Because of this, the US started a big check or investigation. They wanted to know which materials came from other countries and how risky that was. The goal was to make more things inside the US. This matched the America First plan. The US wanted to build more factories and find its own sources of materials. The president said that America should not be in danger if another country, like China, stopped selling important items. They also looked at the supply chain, the path materials take from the factory to the final product. The US wanted to make this path safer and more reliable.So. The US tried to depend less on China and more on itself or other friendly countries. 7. How this affects the world. This trade fight between the US and China doesn't just affect them. It affects the whole world. Why? Because they are the biggest economies. When they argue, it's like throwing a stone into a pond. The waves go everywhere. Experts say that these high taxes could make prices rise for many things. People in the US might have to pay more for everyday items made in China. Also, American farmers and businesses that sell to China could lose customers. They might sell less and earn less money. Some workers might lose their jobs. The same can happen in China. If Chinese factories sell fewer goods to the US, workers there may also lose jobs.It is hard to know what will happen next. Some people think the trade war will create some new jobs in America. Others say it will hurt both sides. Many believe that no one really wins a trade war. It can hurt regular people, businesses, and even the world economy. That's why many people hope that both countries can find a better way to trade fairly and peaceful.